Kody tried to expose Janelle's fiancé, but things quickly and publicly turned around. A prenuptial agreement and a written transfer of property changed the legal and financial position. Because of how things went, Kody lost the collateral tied to Janelle's future assets and income. By the end, Kody doesn't have anything left. Janelle Brown's role as a family's financial supporter was stable and well known for many years. She kept working, brought in money, and helped make choices about the family's money that affected spending on things like food and shelter. Reports and on-screen accounts said she worked long hours, paid for shared living costs, and put money into retirement plans when money was tight. At the same time, not everyone owned land or had a stable place to live. There was no permanent home given to Janelle, and she stayed linked to the Coyote Pass property, which was never built on. Meanwhile, Kody Brown and Robin Brown lived in a fully purchased home with established utilities and infrastructure. The way things were run showed a controlled financial pool, but sharing resources did not mean that everyone owned the same assets. The core pattern noticed was consistent with the statement "money seeks control" for Kody. Following Janelle's separation from the marriage, internal expectations allegedly aligned with a decline in her financial position. There were circulating claims that Kody thought Janelle would experience financial instability within a limited time frame. This expectation was based on the assumption that shared income structures had been important to her stability. However, the expected outcome did not occur. That's when everything changed. A new variable entered the situation through the presence of Janelle's fiancé, whose identity remained secret, but whose financial status became a focal point. Available reports described him as financially independent, business-oriented, and working outside of reality television income streams. The contrast between this individual and Kody was quickly noted in discussions surrounding financial behavior and asset handling. There were also indications of a private engagement and possible off-camera wedding planning. The observable change was summarized in the statement, "Janelle didn't fall, she leveled up." Subsequently, Kody started a public narrative through a reported interview where he described the fiancé as financially motivated. He claimed that the person was leveraging Janelle's public profile for gain. This positioning matched with the framework often described as classic projection. The intention behind the statements looked to be reputational damage to the new relationship. The answer did not align with that expectation. Online communities began analyzing available data linked to the fiancé's background. Public results suggested business ownership, diversified assets, and a net worth exceeding typical reality television earnings. This directly refuted the earlier claims. As a result, Kody's narrative collapsed under public scrutiny, and commentary across platforms mirrored criticism of his statements. The response included descriptions of jealousy and inconsistency in financial positioning. At the same time, another development emerged regarding a potential television wedding special connected to Janelle's future plans. Industry speculation stated that such a project would produce significant revenue. In response, reports suggested that Kody sought a financial share, referencing a claim of back spousal support. This stance introduced a contradiction, as previous financial decisions did not include equivalent support toward Janelle's independent assets. This situation caused a dual outcome scenario. If legal action were taken, it would publicly document financial motivations tied to the claim. If no action were taken, the financial opportunity would stay exclusively with Janelle. This situation was summarized clearly: he's completely cornered. Network involvement brought a structural shift. Reports suggested that TLC officials addressed the situation directly, warning against interference with production. Potential consequences included cash penalties or contract limitations. This marked a shift in control, where Kody was no longer positioned as the central decision-maker, and Janelle became the main focus of upcoming content. Following these events, Kody's public approach changed. Statements attributed to him described the fiancé as manipulative and labeled Janelle as an asset. This language matched with past patterns of financial framing in relationships. The response from the fiancé differed greatly. There were no public interviews or direct comments. Instead, a documented move altered the narrative. Janelle was put on the legal deed of a property before marriage. This action gave immediate legal ownership and financial security. The timing, occurring prior to formal marriage, was important as it removed conditional dependency. The comparison between past and present financial systems became measurable. Under Kody's structure, Janelle did not receive formal ownership of shared properties despite long-term contributions. Under the fiancé's arrangement, ownership was granted immediately and documented legally. This contrasts back the statement. This is what real provision looks like. From a behavioral standpoint, the difference represented two distinct financial models. Kody's method aligned with transaction-based relationships where financial input influenced control. The fiancé's method aligned with security-based structuring, where ownership was transferred without conditional exchange. This difference led to the conclusion, Kody can't understand unconditional giving. Parallel to these events, Robin Brown's response became part of the public talk. Reports suggested attempts to frame the situation as a loss of shared financial stability. This included statements emphasizing the effect on the family pot. The public response did not support this framing. Commentary across platforms centered on imbalances in contribution and long-term dependency systems. The prevailing answer was summarized in the phrase, "The ATM is closed." At this point, Janelle's position had changed significantly. She was no longer financially dependent on shared structures and had acquired independent assets, legal protection, and a new financial partnership. This progression aligned with a measurable change from resource contribution without ownership to ownership with safety. Another development involved Christine Brown and David Woolley, who were reported to have publicly backed Janelle's situation. A widely shared reference included a toast with the phrase, "Ironclad prenups and real men." This statement highlighted legal protection and contrasted it with past arrangements. The impact included reinforcement of Janelle's new role and further public scrutiny of Kody's past decisions. The final structural change happened during the legal marriage process. When Janelle signed the marriage license, it created a new legal framework. This framework included a prenup and asset protection measures that eliminated any residual claims tied to earlier relationships. The result was definitive. No money, no power, no pressure. The cumulative result of these advances was measurable across multiple areas. Kody's situation shifted to financial isolation with reduced access to shared income streams. Public perception reflected accountability tied to past financial decisions. Family dynamics also changed, with independent alliances forming outside his control. The sequence confirms the statement, his greed caused his downfall. At the conclusion of these events, the contrast stayed clear and consistent. Kody stayed tied to existing obligations and reduced influence, while Janelle worked within a legally protected and financially independent structure. The result is summarized directly. She didn't lose, she escaped. The following questions are based on observable future possibilities. Will Kody try to sue? Is this karma or justice? The structure of the events shows a consistent pattern of conflict, escalation, and resolution through legal and financial mechanisms. Each stage presented new variables, resulting in measurable changes in control, ownership, and public positioning. This progression keeps engagement through continuous shifts in outcome and clearly stated consequences.